Halloween had always been my favorite night of the year. I loved everything about it, the decorations, the costumes, the thrill of venturing out into the dark, collecting candy from strangers. I'd go with my friends from house to house, scaring each other with silly ghost stories, and daring each other to go up to the creepiest houses. But this year, things felt different. I was older now, practically too old for trick-or-treating. But something deep inside me told me I had to go out one last time. I couldn't shake the feeling that Halloween wouldn't be complete if I didn't. My friends had all outgrown it, so I was alone as I wandered through our dimly lit neighborhood, shadows flickering under streetlights. The candy didn't matter anymore, I just wanted that last, perfect Halloween night. That's when I saw it, a small house at the end of a long, winding path, shrouded in trees that cast eerie shadows. It was an old Victorian, the kind that seemed plucked from a ghost story. The windows were dark, the paint chipped and peeling, and the entire place seemed to pulse with a strange, quiet energy. It hadn't been there before, at least, I didn't remember ever seeing it. The path was lined with flickering jack-o'-lanterns, each carved with a face more twisted than the last. I should have turned around then, but I felt this strange pull, like the house was calling me. My feet moved on their own, step after step, until I stood in front of the door. I hesitated. There was no one else around, no sounds except the crunch of leaves under my feet. I lifted my hand and knocked, my knuckles echoing in the stillness. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the door creaked open, revealing darkness beyond. "Trick or treat," I said, feeling a bit foolish. My voice barely made it past a whisper. Out of the darkness, a figure emerged, a man in a dusty black suit, with skin so pale it almost glowed in the dim light. He smiled, and his teeth were sharp, too sharp. His eyes, dark and hollow, seemed to look right through me. "Come in," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been waiting for you." My heart pounded, and I wanted to run, but something in his gaze held me captive. Against every instinct, I stepped into the house. The door closed behind me with a soft click. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of candles and something else, something sweet and metallic. The man led me down a narrow hallway lined with strange portraits. Each face looked familiar, like people I'd seen around town but could never quite place. Their expressions were frozen in twisted terror, their eyes wide with fear. Who are these people?" I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're past visitors," the man replied, his voice soft, almost amused. "All those who wanted one last Halloween night. Just like you." A chill ran through me as I realized the portraits weren't paintings. They were photographs, each face lifelike, the eyes staring out as if begging to be freed. We reached a door at the end of the hallway, and the man gestured for me to open it. My hand shook as I reached for the knob, but some strange part of me felt compelled to obey. The door swung open to reveal a small room, empty except for a single mirror. In the mirror, I saw myself, pale and wide-eyed, standing alone. But as I stared, the reflection began to change. My face twisted into a mask of fear, my eyes wide and pleading. I looked just like the faces in the hallway. I spun around to escape, but the door was gone. The room was gone. I was surrounded by nothing but darkness, trapped in the reflection of my own horror. And now, every Halloween, I wait in the old house at the end of the road, hoping someone will knock. Just one trick-or-treater to take my place, so I can finally be free. It was Halloween night, and the streets were alive with costumed kids running from house to house, their bags getting heavier with every trick or treat. I was with my friends, hitting up every house in the neighborhood. We were practically racing each other to see who could get the most candy. That's when we spotted the strange little house at the end of Elm Street. The place was dark, no decorations, no porch light. The paint was faded and peeling, and the yard was filled with overgrown weeds. But on the porch was a single, small bowl of candy. And taped to the bowl was a note, "Take only one, if you dare." Of course, we dared. "Probably a cheap trick," my friend Max said, grabbing a handful of candy. "I'll take what I want." The rest of us hesitated, but he looked so smug, I didn't want him to think I was scared. So, I reached out and grabbed 2 pieces, pocketing them quickly. My other friends did the same, each of us grinning at our small act of rebellion. It wasn't until later, when we'd finished making our rounds, that we noticed something strange. I reached into my bag to pull out the candies from that house, but instead of the 2 I'd taken, there were 3. And then 4. They kept multiplying, spilling out of my bag in a growing pile. "What the?" I muttered, looking at my friends. They were all staring at their own bags with the same horrified expression. Each of us had more candy than we'd taken, each piece wrapped in shiny black paper, marked with a strange, twisting symbol. "This is messed up," Max whispered. "Let's just get rid of it." We emptied our bags, tossing the candies into a trash can on the corner. For a moment, I felt relieved, as if we'd broken whatever weird magic was in those candies. But then I felt it, a weight in my pocket. I reached in, and my heart froze. There, in my hand, was one of the cursed candies. "No way," I whispered. I threw it on the ground, but it reappeared, this time in my other pocket. My friends were panicking, each of them finding the candy on them no matter how many times they tried to get rid of it. "What do we do?" my friend Lily asked, her voice barely a whisper. It won't go away." As if in answer, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out to see a single text from an unknown number: "The candy is yours now. Eat it, or suffer the consequences." Max, ever the skeptic, rolled his eyes. "Fine," he muttered, tearing open the candy wrapper. "If eating it is all it takes to end this stupid prank, then whatever." He popped the candy into his mouth and chewed. For a moment, he seemed fine. Then he froze, his eyes widening. His skin turned pale, and he grabbed at his throat, as if he couldn't breathe. "Max?" I yelled, reaching out to him, but he stumbled back, coughing and wheezing. He collapsed to the ground, gasping, and then, just as suddenly, he stopped. His eyes were wide, staring blankly at the night sky. We screamed, backing away in horror. Max wasn't moving. Then, slowly, he sat up. But it wasn't him. His eyes were empty, cold, like he was seeing right through us. He smiled, a strange, twisted grin that didn't belong to him. "Max?" Lily whispered, her voice trembling. He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at each of us, one by one, his mouth stretching into a smile that grew impossibly wide, his teeth sharp, gleaming in the moonlight. "It's your turn," he said in a voice that wasn't his. One by one, my friends and I looked at the candies that had reappeared in our hands. I knew, deep down, that we didn't have a choice. So, with trembling fingers, we unwrapped them and lifted them to our mouths. As the candy touched my tongue, I felt a strange, cold sensation spread through my body. My vision blurred, the world around me spinning. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The last thing I remember was the feeling of my own mouth stretching into a grin, wide and unnatural, as a dark presence settled inside me. Now, every Halloween, I'm drawn back to that house, a new face in the shadows, waiting for the next kid to ignore the warning and take more than one piece. Halloween night had always been my favorite. I loved the thrill, the costumes, the decorations. But this year, I was determined to find something truly scary, something that would make this Halloween unforgettable. So, when my friend Ella told me about the house that only appears on Halloween, I knew I had to see it for myself. According to local legend, the house was cursed, only revealing itself one night a year, on Halloween. The story said if you made it inside, you'd get the best candy in the world, if you could make it out again. We set off at dusk, determined to be the first to find it. We wandered through winding streets, past quiet houses and deserted roads, until we reached a part of town I'd never been to before. And then we saw it. It was an old Victorian house, looming up at the end of a narrow, overgrown path. Its paint was faded, the windows dark and lifeless, yet somehow it seemed to watch us. I couldn't shake the feeling that it knew we were there. "Are you sure this is the place?" I asked, suddenly feeling a pang of doubt. Ella just grinned. "Come on, don't tell me you're scared." She led the way up the path, and as we got closer, the house seemed to grow larger, almost pulsing with dark energy. The door creaked open as we approached, as if inviting us in. We stepped inside, the air thick and cold, smelling of old wood and something metallic. A dim hallway stretched out in front of us, lined with faded portraits. They showed children, each one dressed in old-fashioned Halloween costumes. But their faces were wrong. They looked scared, their eyes wide with terror, as if they'd been frozen in a scream. We moved forward, deeper into the house, the floorboards groaning under our feet. "Just grab some candy, and we'll get out," I whispered, trying to sound braver than I felt. But as we entered the main room, we found something even stranger, a large bowl, overflowing with candy, sitting on a small table. There was something about it that seemed off, each piece wrapped in shiny black paper that seemed to absorb the light. "Jackpot," Ella whispered, reaching for the bowl. But before she could grab anything, a voice echoed from somewhere deep in the house. "1 piece, each." We froze. The voice was low and raspy, like it hadn't been used in a long time. But Ella, never one to be scared off easily, just laughed it off. "Let's see what they have," she said, grabbing a handful of candy and shoving it into her bag. I hesitated but eventually took 1 piece, following the warning. We turned to leave, but as soon as we did, the hallway behind us was gone, replaced by another door, a door that hadn't been there when we walked in. This wasn't here before," I whispered, panic creeping into my voice. "Relax, it's just a trick," Ella said, though even she looked unsure. She opened the door, and we found ourselves in a room that was identical to the one we just left. Same walls, same portraits, same bowl of candy in the center. "Let's just get out of here," I said, but when I turned around, the door was gone. "No, no, no," Ella whispered, turning frantically. "This is impossible." We tried to find an exit, but every door we opened led us back to the same room, with the same bowl of candy. The faces in the portraits seemed to watch us, their expressions twisted with something that looked almost like pity. What if we have to eat the candy?" I suggested, feeling a chill run down my spine. Without waiting for me to protest, Ella unwrapped one of the candies and popped it into her mouth. She swallowed, her face contorting in disgust. "Ugh, tastes like ash," she muttered. But as soon as she said it, her eyes glazed over, and she began to walk, almost robotically, toward one of the portraits. "Ella?" I whispered, but she didn't respond. She reached out and touched the portrait, a girl in an old, torn witch costume, and as her hand made contact, her whole body seemed to freeze. Her face twisted, her eyes wide with terror, mirroring the expression of the girl in the portrait. And then, she was gone. I screamed her name, but there was no answer. The only sound was the echo of my own voice, swallowed by the silence. Desperate, I grabbed another piece of candy, hoping it would break whatever spell held me. But as I unwrapped it, I felt a sharp, cold breeze and saw, out of the corner of my eye, the portrait of Ella, the real Ella, staring back at me from the wall, her eyes wide, trapped. I dropped the candy and backed away, stumbling toward the door. This time, it led back outside, into the cool October night. I looked back, my heart racing. The house was gone. Just an empty, quiet lot, with a few faded candy wrappers blowing in the wind. To this day, I don't know what happened in that house, or how I escaped. But every Halloween, when I pass by that lot, I swear I see a flash of her face in the shadows, her eyes wide and pleading, trapped forever in the house that only appears on Halloween.